forgot to turn on the recording. Okay. I know that a lot of you have been in classrooms. So in the very first chapter, when they're talking about using scientifically based practices in the classrooms, they talk about this folklore that's transmitted in schools, right? And that's on page 5 of chapter 1. And this folklore that's transmitted mouth to mouth. And they talk about, one of their examples is principals, right? So that if a principal leaves, the teachers start talking about that principal and good things and bad things. And that's called folklore because it's secondhand, right? So anybody have experience with folklore that's kind of been passed down in schools, or things that you have been told that are more, not maybe myths, but more of the folklore kinds of things that might not be based in facts?
Mm.
Can we think of examples? What policies and procedures can you think of that are in place in schools that are based more on tradition and not necessarily research-based practices? There's no wrong answer. It's more of an experience, thing. How about gifted education? What's the belief about children who are labeled gifted in elementary school? What kinds of things do we often offer them?
I know, like, for me in elementary, we had like Odyssey is what they called it. And so it was whatever the gifted. And
Odyssey of the mind, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like once a week, and it was just your own separate class. You got pulled out for part of the day and you did your own thing. But they don't do that anymore. So
but what kinds of activities did they do?
I'm trying to think. It was I remember doing a lot of projects. Or like poster presentations, stuff like that. I remember doing that.
It's very project-based.
Yeah.
So is that method for students who are labeled as gifted based on scientific research that's a good practice only for gifted students? So-called gifted students. Or is that a folklore? Is that a practice that would be good for all children?
I mean, I don't see how it would hurt everybody, I mean, it's more practice, more. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was teaching 5th grade in Lynchburg City Schools, this was years and years ago. And the students in the gifted program were going to see a play at EC Glass. And I remember asking the principal, why aren't we taking the entire 5th grade, right? We only have one 5th grade class. There are only 25 children. Why can't all 25 5th graders go see this play? Why is it only for the gifted students? And basically the response I got was, but that's how we've always done it. So that's folklore, right? So that's that folklore passed down, that only our gifted children go to these plays because that's for the gifted children, right? And that's what I'm talking about, this folklore mentality, things that are passed down because it's already done that way, shouldn't we question those kinds of things, right? That going to that play is good for all children. And then when I mentioned that, the next response I got was, what do you think? It's too expensive to get a bus to take them all there, right? They're going to miss a half a day of school. And it doesn't matter if the gifted children miss a half a day of school. There's another myth, right?
Yeah.
So I said, well, if I can get the money for the bus to take them all there, can we take them all? And the principal, thinking there's no way she's going to get the school division to pay for a bus, I marched myself down to the superintendent's office and argued they all should go. And he really didn't have a counter argument. I said that the rationale is because this is how we've always done it, is not a good one. This is a good educational practice for all children, not just for a handful of children who in elementary school have been labeled as gifted, right? Which is also a fallacy, right? How does anybody know the population of students who fall into the truly gifted category on the bell curve? 2% of the entire population falls into the gifted category. More than 20% of students in public schools are identified as gifted. So what's really happening when we are identifying children as gifted? Who are we identifying?
The top performers.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I have created a term, and I refer to this population as academically advantaged. Most children in gifted programs come from homes where they're academically advantaged, right? They have either one parent or two parents in the home who have higher education, either an associate's degree or higher. They have reading materials. Their parents either are stay-at-home, they have a stay-at-home parent, or they have a parent who only works one job. When I taught at Darrington Elementary, most of the parents of the children at Darrington Elementary, and Darrington Elementary is an inner city school, 95% of the children are on free or reduced lunch, mostly free lunch, right? And most of their parents work two jobs. So that parent has very little time to go to museums, to go to plays. None of my children had ever been to the beach before, right? They didn't go on vacations. So they didn't have the same academic advantage as a child who grows up in a household with, like, think of a child who grew up, my children, right? They had advantages. One, they have two parents who are college professors, right? So think about that advantage that gives them right there. So they have that academic resource. They have tutors 24/7 at home, right? My husband was an engineer, and I'm in education. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of publishing. So they had somebody to help them with their math, and they had somebody to help them with their writing assignments, right? So you kind of think about that when we're looking at children who are like we put them into these categories before we should put them in these categories. And a lot of it is based on folklore, right? I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Go Center in Lynchburg City Schools. 2 people. So the Go Center is called Gifted Opportunities. It is housed at Payne Elementary School, and all of the children in all of the elementary schools, the teachers recommend them for this Gifted Opportunities Center at Payne Elementary School. And I moved here from Michigan way back when, and it existed way back when. And I remember going to, so coming from Michigan, I was really surprised at how the schools worked in this area. When I came to Lynchburg City from Michigan, the kindergarten students had 7 workbooks. I came from a school in Michigan where the principal banned worksheets. As a teacher, you could not give a worksheet. So I come to Lynchburg, and the kindergartners, and that some of this book I take issue with, and we'll talk about that. And they have all these worksheets that they have to do. And the preschools had worksheets because they wanted to prep them for kindergarten in Lynchburg City schools. I was like, okay, you people are out of control with these worksheets. And so I remember talking to the superintendent at the time and saying, this is not good for kids. We've got to go back to a different way to look at how children learn. And so I started going around to all of the schools in Lynchburg and kind of looking at them. I went to Payne Elementary School at lunchtime. Now, Payne Elementary School is in the middle of a neighborhood in Lynchburg City. Okay. I walked, and actually I used to teach in Detroit. I walked into the school at lunch. Now, oh, you're back. I lost you for a minute. Did you? I think my internet's going down. Anyway, okay. So where was I? Did you all? Could you see me that whole time?
No,
you froze for a little bit, and
Okay.
then we couldn't hear you, and then you left.
Okay, I lost all of you. I hope I didn't swear in the middle of that out loud. Okay, so I walked into Payne Elementary School, and I kid you not, the first thing that popped into my mind, and please do not take this as an offense, was an Oreo cookie. Imagine this. Most of the children at that school were Black. The Go Center sat in the middle of the cafeteria for lunch, and they were all white. And I left that school, and I walked down to the superintendent's office, and I said, how can you let this happen? You have a segregated school within a school, right? I mean, it was appalling. I can't believe that they actually allowed that to happen and had them eat lunch by themselves. And that was a long time ago. And I've been fighting, and it's not, the Go Center is a great place. The Go Center has great education. Those teachers are spot on. But my argument to every superintendent has always been that education should be for every child in Lynchburg City schools. It shouldn't only be for the Go Center students, right? That they do projects and they do hands-on and they do all these fun things and they dress up, when they're studying Greek, and they all dress up as Greek gods and goddesses, and they have these festivals, and it's a wonderful program. And I was just very upset about it. So I made headway with the last not Crystal Edwards, but the superintendent before her, and I was in his office because the superintendents were not happy when they would see me coming into their offices. But I sat down with him. I said, you've got to do something about this Go Center. You cannot continue to serve the children of the city, because not only, and this is my pet peeve, we're models for these children. And when we tell these children, when we show these children that one group that looks one way gets all these great things, and another group that looks another way doesn't get these things, we send a clear message about how we value them as learners. Mm-hmm. So when my children were in school, I never let them in gifted ed programs, ever. because I think that it actually does harm to society as a whole when we segregate our children at very young ages and we tell groups of children, you are better and you are not. And then when it looks like the white children are getting this fabulous education and the Black children are on floors 1 and 2 are not, we create a systemic problem from kindergarten on, right? And we do it to ourselves. So Braybrand, the superintendent before Dr. Edwards, in my office, he said, well, he told me, Peggy, I can't get rid of the Go Center. It politically is political suicide. I said, well, you know what? Sometimes moral and ethical values should supersede the political values of the society, whatever, your community. Some things should take precedent. So what he did was he created gifted opportunity. He put a gifted education teacher in every elementary school. Not really what I wanted. It doesn't really solve the problem. We still have the problem. Now, Crystal Edwards might be a little bit more willing to listen to me when I go back to her, because I talked to her before she came here and talked to her about, we are creating some of these problems in our schools by segregating children, right? And I think that all of this is going to come to the forefront, because I think that it's the role of education in society is very powerful. How we structure our schools, how we teach our children is really, really important. And I don't mean to get on a bandwagon, but all of this is all my experiences have come kind of to the forefront. I had an experience where I went to another elementary school. It was Bedford Hills. And I was there to help the kindergarten teachers do project-based learning with their kindergartners. So I come to the school, I'm walking down the hallway, I go into this class, so I'm walking down the hallway and I'm looking in these classrooms and they're kind of dark, and there's the kindergarten mats. Mm-hmm. There's children on the kindergarten mats, not really resting, but they're jumping up and down and they're rolling around on their mats. And I'm looking at these classrooms. I get down to the end of the hallway and there's another classroom, and I walk in and there's all of these children and they're doing these great things. They have centers set up and they're doing science experiments and math activities, and they're writing and they're playing in the sandbox. It was wonderful. I look around, what do you think I saw in that classroom? Who was in that classroom? What type of children were in that classroom?
Gifted?
The what?
Students. The gifted students?
Well, they didn't label them gifted. They labeled them, this was even worse than the gifted program. They labeled them the non-nappers. These are children who don't need a nap. I said, well, isn't that really interesting? And you will find out as you're in classes with me, I'm a very direct person. So I looked at the teachers and I said, these are your non-nappers? Isn't it interesting that all of your non-nappers are white? And I walked past the classroom and all your nappers are mostly little black boys jumping on their mats. So who needs a nap? And they didn't know what to say to me. I left that school and I went down to the superintendent's office and I said, this is blatant racism in the schools. This has got to stop. You cannot do this to children. Well, the principal and the teachers got in a lot of trouble because it was true. The superintendent went there and he saw the same thing I did, right? And that's part of that folklore. That's how it's always been done. And basically I was horrified, right? And it was, I think as teachers, we need to recognize when things are not happening the way they should be happening in schools, and to have the fortitude to speak up against those, right? And I know that, and I had been teaching in Detroit for 7 years. And actually, I found out later that that's why they hired me, because I came from Detroit, and they hired me to teach at Darrington. I thought, okay, right there, like, I don't even think it crossed their minds, because I said I was from Detroit. They assumed, oh, she's from Detroit, she can teach in this school, right? And anyway, so there's lots of things that happen in our schools that when I read this piece about folklore, I thought, this is something you have to watch out for as teachers. And sometimes it's not easy when you're a first-year teacher or you're new, right? Of course, I came into Lynchburg City. I was not a new teacher. I had more than 7 years, because I taught in New York for 2 years. So I had 9 years under my belt. So a little bit more experience, but these are things you have to watch out for. You are the advocate for the children in your classrooms, right? And sometimes you're the only advocate in the school system for your children. So that's what I'm talking about, this folklore, and just watch out for that folklore. The other thing I wanted to mention is, what did I mark in here? They have some good activities in here that you want to pay attention to. The one thing you want to pay attention to is on page 11, figure 2.1, the overview of phonological awareness skills and activities. It's in a box. So just kind of I don't know if you can see that or not, take another look at this and mark it in your book. Most likely there will be a question on the final, and remember, it's open book, so just tag it in your book for quick reference. But I had another question in here for you. Oh, yes. So they have these tests, and I think they start talking about them on page 12. So there are two assessments that they use a lot in this region. And one is the TOPA, and that's on page 12, the test of phonological awareness. It's called the TOPA. And I believe that Professor Parker will have you in the 511 class in the test and measurements. You're going to explore some of these tests. I was online today with Pearson, and I was trying to get the tests online, but it looks like we have the kits on campus, and it looks like you'll probably we'll have a day when you can come to campus and just take one of the tests with you. So, but Professor Parker will let you know about that. But this TOPA is something that you'll learn how to do, or will expose you to that, because they do use it in Lynchburg City schools. They also use, they used to use DIBELS on page 13, the phoneme segmentation fluency evaluation. It's a dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. That used to be very popular. It's kind of going out of popularity, but you might see it creeping back in with the new focus on phonics and phonemic awareness in Lynchburg City schools and in the state of Virginia. So the state of Virginia is moving away from leveled texts, leveled books, and they're going more towards phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. And teachers are not going to be happy about this, because schools have spent lots of money on these leveled books, and they're not going to be able to use them anymore. So we'll see how that's going to go across with them. But you'll learn how to do this. But one thing that they said in here that kind of perked my ears was that they give, when they say the kindergarten version consists of 2 subtests. First, students are asked to mark pictures, multiple choice, that begin with the same sound as the target word. So think about that for a minute. think back, how many of you did phonics worksheets when you were in school or saw a teacher using phonics worksheets with pictures? Okay. Can you think of a problem with those worksheets? Mickey? Did you have your hand up, Mickey?
Yeah, I did. They used to give them to us when I was in elementary school.
Do you remember anything about the pictures?
I just remember some of them had like a picture of a cat on there and then dog and just the basic pictures. I don't remember anything specific about it.
Did anybody ever have a problem identifying what the picture was supposed to be? Kiesha, I hear you shaking your head. Can you think of an example?
I can't remember, but I do remember not being able to identify what some pictures were. So
Yeah.
I either had to ask or I just sat there because I was a shyer student. So if I didn't understand, sometimes I'd just sit there and I wouldn't know. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's very common. Some of those pictures, Josh, you also were shaking your head.
Yeah, I remember several times when I wouldn't be able to identify what the heck the picture was supposed to be, especially because it was black and white.
Uh-huh.
That is even more difficult to tell what the heck a picture is supposed to be showing you or doing or whatever. And I couldn't understand
Yeah.
at all what it was supposed to be. And it was really confusing, and
Right.
I would get frustrated.
So that deals with the validity of the test. So validity means, are you testing what you think you're testing, right? So if we think we're testing letter and sound understanding, but the students can't even identify the picture, so they're getting the sound wrong because it shows a picture of a fox and they say dog. But in the assessment, they get it wrong because it's fox, right? And so the validity of some of these assessments is not accurate, especially if you have children who are shyer, who don't really want to ask questions about what the picture is. And many, many children are like that, right? So you have to be careful of the validity of some of these assessments. And so you, as a teacher, you kind of need to keep in mind, you know, this picture, it's like, I've seen some that are just, sometimes I don't know what they're talking about when I see some of these assessments. What else did I? I wanted to point out for you. I wrote some questions down. Oh, okay. On page 12, and I'm trying not to keep my, I'm not a big phonics person, but I understand the need to be able to teach phonics. But you also have to think as a teacher, what is valuable for my students? And the most important thing, and they do point that out in here, is the most important thing is to assess individual students and develop a plan for the students in your classroom in small groups, right? They also point out that small group instruction is much more valuable than either one-on-one instruction or whole group instruction. That the small groups, anywhere from 3 to 6 children, is much more effective. Why do you think that is? That small group is more effective than whole group or one-on-one?
I mean, I can't say exactly why certain students might feel this way, but for me personally, I would feel more comfortable sharing in a small group versus one-on-one or with the whole class.
Yes. And that's the reason why. It's because students learn much more from each other than they often do from the adult. And so that even though the adult is modeling, when you have a small group and the children are also modeling for each other, children are much more comfortable. They will share more, they'll participate more. Exactly what Josh said. In a whole classroom, they get lost. One-on-one, sometimes they feel intimidated, shy, or embarrassed. So the small group works a lot better. In here, they also talk about, as part of this comprehensive test of phonological processing, the CTOP, is they say phonological memory subtests include recall of a series of digits and repetition of non-words, like blit. So these are often called nonsense words. You're going to read in the Frank Smith book. He has a very strong opinion about nonsense words. So if I can't remember what chapter he talks about nonsense words, but for the person who comes across nonsense words in this book, take a look at page 12 and be able to discuss and compare and contrast Frank Smith's opinion on nonsense words and Sharon Vaughn and Sylvia Lennon Thompson's view on nonsense words. Okay, because they're very different. So just an initial response. What's your gut feeling about children being able to, and there's no right or wrong answer, there's lots of different opinions here, on learning how to pronounce nonsense words? Is it valuable? Is it valuable sometimes and not others? What might be the value in a child being able to pronounce nonsense words?
I think if it's close to like another word that's an actual word, then it could be useful. Like if they have like a prefix, but then the latter part of the nonsense word is just nonsense, then that could be useful in, you know, helping them learn that prefix or something like that.
Right. Okay. Also, it would give you an idea how well the child knows their sounds, that it doesn't have to be, so you know that they know their sounds. It's not a sight word that they've memorized, right? So that could be the value. And it also, one thing I do like that they say in this book is the time you spend on teaching phonemic awareness is in small bits, right? You don't spend an hour, you spend 10, 15 minutes. Create some of these activities they have in here for you. You do in sound bites, like when you're getting ready to line up for the cafeteria, the teacher's asking some of these questions, holding up different letters and talking about the sounds and having students blend the sounds together, so that it's not, it's supposed to also be fun for the students, fun for the teacher. And I think that that's probably where we have made mistakes with teaching phonemic awareness in phonics. We've made it a drill and kill process rather than a fun activity that's short, right? Josh, have you never heard that drill and kill before?
Oh, I remember, yeah, just flashbacks, you know, from early childhood, elementary, middle school,
yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah.
through my mind, so.
Yeah, and it right. We don't want to turn students off by, you know, pushing so many worksheets that they just shut you down, right? We want to create these. If you're going to teach phonemic awareness, it needs to be fun, active, and engaging, and short periods of time. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind. Oh, the other thing that, as you read this book, and this is going to actually, as I read through this, I think of, wow, that would make a great research project, right? Because if you look at some of their citations, they're very old. Even the citations from 2000, when they cite a work from 2000, that means it's 20 years old. Now, to get a piece of work published will sometimes take up to 10 years. So when the data was collected, it could have been 30 years ago by the, when they're talking about this. I've written articles. We're working on an article now that's in its, we're making changes for the publisher, and we collected this data 9 years ago. So when it gets published, probably in 2021, it doesn't mean that last year we collected these data. It means 10 years ago we collected these data. So by the time it hits publication, it's already old. So, kind of take a look at the citation dates, and when they're really old, unless it's a piece of seminal work, which means it was the very first research in the area and it was a theoretically based research. You'll get more of that in research class, but some of the citations in here are too old. They need to be redone. Even the National Reading Panel research is too old. It needs to be redone. So kind of take that with a grain of salt. On page 17, they talk about, and through this, they talk a lot about what activities and things you should do in kindergarten. And as I was reading what they wanted kindergartners to do, and they're talking about multi-syllable words. And I don't know, I wanted to ask all of you, what's happening in kindergarten these days? For those of you who have been in schools. What do kindergarten classrooms look like?
Do you mean in terms of reading?
In terms of reading, or yeah, anything like the structure, what are the children doing? In terms of reading specifically?
The last time I visited a kindergarten classroom, they were in groups most of the time.
They were in groups. Okay.
Yeah.
What were they doing in those groups?
Where they were basically working on, they either read books that were in our reading level along with other students that were in our reading level, or they did like worksheets and they were like sounding out words. So,
Okay.
yeah. And they would
Anybody else?
switch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any experience with kindergartens?
At our school, we have like a blended kindergarten where they've tried to take, I don't know what they changed the name to, but it's kids from our DD room, developmentally delayed is what they called it. They changed it this year. I don't know what they decided to call it.
Okay.
What might be multi something, but they have taken them up there like 2, 3 at a time and tried to blend them in so that they can maybe get to the same level.
Okay. So they're using inclusion. What were the kindergartners? What types of activities were happening in the classroom?
That day that I was in there, they had chicks. So they were doing like an incubation project,
Okay.
sort of, but they were gathered around these incubators on a big carpet.
Okay. Probably a little more developmentally appropriate than worksheets, right? So there's an organization called the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC, and you'll be hearing more about it in other classes. But they do a lot of research on young children, and basically their position is that 4 and 5 and even 6-year-olds The curriculum should be play-based, right? And our kindergartens look very different today than they used to look. They look more like first grade, right? They're not play-based. They don't play with blocks. They don't play with sand. They do, they don't have a lot of time to explore and do dramatic play, and right, it's more sitting down, right? And think of a 5-year-old. In fact, we were just talking about this at dinner tonight. I don't know how the conversation came up, but my 21-year-old son was talking about how excruciatingly painful middle school was, or elementary school was for him, because he had to sit for so long. And we were talking about the rule of thumb for attention span, right? And it has to do with brain development and physical development. Does anybody remember or have heard, like, how long should you have children sit depending on what grade they're in? Sit and listen to you as a teacher, or work on a worksheet.
Is it a minute for every year of life?
Yes. So if I'm teaching 5-year-olds, they can sit and listen for 5 minutes. 10-year-olds, 10 minutes. Adults, how long can adults attend? I think I said this in the other class.
I think I read this somewhere. I think it was like 15 to 20 minutes or something like that.
15 or 20 minutes, right? And if you think about it, ministers and pastors know that. At least the good ones do. Because if you've ever listened to a very gifted minister or pastor of a church, what strategies do they use to keep the attention of their congregation? And coaches do the same thing.
Well, I know, like at my church, the sermons are always under 15 minutes.
Because he knows the attention span.
Yeah.
And if they're going to be longer, what strategies do they employ? Have you ever seen them walk back and forth across?
Okay.
So when they do that, what's happening to the people in the congregation? I'm moving my head. I'm watching the minister walk back and forth, which adds movement, right? Which changes my brain, okay? They will do choral response. Good teachers will do this as well. They'll ask everybody to say some kind of phrase, or, do something to kind of keep everybody kind of awake and aware. Sometimes I joke, because I was raised Catholic. I don't know if any of you have been to a Catholic service, right? And the Catholics are up and down. They're standing and sitting and kneeling and, shaking hands. And all of that is to try to keep the congregation aware and awake through this hour and a half long service, right? So they're taking into account that attention span of adults, which is exactly what Josh said, 15 to 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes. And this is important for teachers as you're teaching reading, no matter what you're teaching, to keep this in mind, right? And I think they do a nice job in chapter 2 by telling teachers, teach these activities in small sound bites. And typically, if you were in a classroom, you would practice these activities with each other. If you have anybody to practice on, try some of these activities, but don't keep this book, because you're going to need it when you're in classrooms, because you'll be teaching reading and you'll need to use some of these activities. Okay. Did you have any questions about anything that you've read so far, or any assignments that you have done for this class? Everybody's good?
I just have one real quick about the writing sample.
Oh yeah. I said this, and somebody else asked this. typically I have you go out and do a writing assignment with a child.
Okay.
I can't. So I think I hid that assignment.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry
So
for all my emails. That was me.
what?
That was me. Sorry for all the emails.
No. Please ask. I do not, I just forgot that to take it down, but I can't ask you to go out.
So we don't have that anymore.
You don't have it anymore. But I do want you to we will talk about the levels of writing development, and I'm trying to find some writing samples in my kids' work because I haven't found any yet. But I'm trying to get some samples, some writing samples, and we'll talk about the different stages of writing.
Okay.
I have it in my dissertation, but I don't know, I did my dissertation when floppy disks were a thing. So I don't have anything that will read my,
Gosh.
yeah.
I remember those.
I date myself there. But, I can't insert my floppy disks to be read anymore, but, and my dissertation is in it's in a hardbound book. So I'm trying to figure out how to maybe share some of that stuff with you. But yeah, you don't do the writing sample thing, so just cross it off the syllabus. Because even if you have access to a young child, I cannot ask you to interact with them just because of the rules and regulations the college has instituted. Okay. But yeah, thank you for asking. If there's other assignments, and I think I tried, what did I put up for you? I guess that was in the special ed class. In the special ed class, I put up 2 documents, and I will share them with you, Erica, that
Okay.
from the Virginia Department of Education on health standards in the schools and what the schools have to do. And I calculated this because they said to follow the CDC guidelines, and the CDC says you're supposed to wash your hands for 20 seconds, which is singing the birthday song twice, right? So if you have 20 children, so I guess it's not going to be 20, but let's say you had 20 children in your class, and before they went to lunch, they all had to wash their hands for 20 seconds. That's 15 minutes. And then when they come back for lunch, they have to wash their hands again. If they go outside, they have to wash their hands again. So I'm thinking, holy cow, washing their hands is going to take probably 2 hours out of their day, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody is, and maybe the people that are planning are taking this into account, but that's really going to change how things work in schools.
Mhm.
If you're going to have your children follow these safety procedures and wash their hands for 20 seconds, 20 seconds is a long time, right?
Yeah.
So so read through those recommendations, and this is from the Virginia Department of Education. And because it is going to change the way things are going to work in schools. Children are not going to be required to wear masks. It's going to be recommended, except for children 2 years old or younger. Teachers are going to have to wear masks if they are not 6 feet from the children. So if you're standing in the front of, so this isn't going to work for elementary teachers, right? Elementary teachers are going to have to wear masks. You're never 6 feet from your children. If you walk down in between desks, you have a mask on. So that is going to be challenging for teachers. And if you wear glasses, you need to get the special mask. And I think the ones we're ordering have the metal bar.
Mhm.
All right. If you don't have the metal bar that you can fit it to your nose, your glasses are going to fog up. So we're trying to get masks that have the metal bar in them, but you can't wear the paper masks. You have to get a cloth mask that has that metal bar. And if you need more than 2, you probably want to order some more for yourself. I just ordered some and just got them. It takes probably 3 to 4 weeks for you to get a good face mask that's going to be comfortable. And you're probably, I think the ones we're buying for our students and our college supervisors are $8 a piece, $8 to $10. And that's probably what you're going to have to pay for a good face mask, because remember, you have to wear it all day.
Mhm.
But we will have 2 for you to wear, and they're washable.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, anything else? Anything else on the Moodle page that doesn't make sense or is confusing? Because I did put this up very quickly. I'm just going to the page now and see if I've added, I don't think I've added anything. Everybody good on the engineering design brief? That those examples help?
Mhm.
Simple.
Yeah, those were helpful.
Good. Good.
Those were helpful.
Good. I think I think I fixed all the links. What happened was my YouTube, they saved it all as private, so I could see it, but none of you could see it. So if a link does not work, please let me know, because I can usually go in and fix it. So I think I have fixed the 2 links that did not work. But if you have something, let me know. Also, under the Frank Smith, who has chapters 1 and 2?
That's me.
Okay.
I just turned it in earlier today.
Okay. Chapter 4 and 5? Mickey, you have 4 and 5? Nobody has 3, right? Okay. So Carter, you have 3. And then we have chapters 6 and 7. Who has chapter 6? Okay. So Kiesia, you're 6 and 7, and then 9 and 10. Erica. Okay. So Carter, that's right. You'll have chapters 3 and 8. Okay. Yeah, I haven't gotten to look at those yet, but I will. So I think that, the running record was a mess. So the person that I've been using to teach the running record, who I really like, for some reason, they've taken all her videos down. So I did not have time to recreate the videos myself. So I found somebody who did the same story, the packing story. She's not as good as the other person I had doing them, but it will give you an idea of a running record. Okay, so it's not as long either as the other person, because the person I had doing it did a much more thorough job, but this will give you an idea of the running record. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you, and I think the rest is pretty self-explanatory. Okay. So I did tell you that I will keep this site open for a full 3 weeks. And if something happens where if you're finding yourself behind, just email me. I don't have to have my grades in until the end of July. So if something happens, you get sick or there's an emergency, we can work that out. Just email me and we'll discuss it. Okay. I can be very, very flexible. All right. Anything else that I can touch on tonight? No? Everything going okay? All right. Well, I'll say good night for the evening. And if you want to meet, if you have questions, please let me know. I'm always available. I think it's good news that we're going to be able to get back into the schools. And it'll be a good experience for you to see how the new normal is going to work in elementary school. But I'm excited to see you all on campus. And we haven't gotten instructions yet. We do know we have to social distance, and they're trying to work out the classrooms, but with our group, it's not going to be a problem because I've kept the enrollment low. So I think we'll be pretty good to go. All right. Okay. Have a good evening, and I'll talk to you all later. Let me know if there's any problems with the website or anything with assignments, please.
Thank
night.
you.
Good night, everybody. It was nice seeing you all.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah.
Okay.